Hi, everyone. This is Sol, and I'm happy to be back. It's been a while since I've been doing a lecture, giving a lecture for the EA Zoom, and many things have passed since. So it was a little touching and heart-moving to see that, this was Linda Johnson's uh, Zoom, because she was the one who normally administered these type of Zoom calls. But I would like to give a big thanks to Sue, who is doing it for her now. And I'm happy that we will continue presenting and giving lectures, particularly the EA paradigm within astrology. So that said, today I will talk about something that's quite serious, which is health and health issues. And in these times where we have so much focus on disease, I've been a little frustrated that we haven't had equal amounts of focus on health, because basically, I guess that's what we would love to have, a stronger and better health, and work with in cooperation with our constitution and our body so that we can survive this experience being on earth without having to go through too much damage. So if we can prevent it, we should prevent it. Now, health and disease is a very tricky area, and I've been studying and practicing astrology for well over 30 years now, and picking up medical astrology a lot because I'm also interested in healing. So my search, my quest, if you like, is always to try to understand who are we. That's what we're looking for in astrology. And when I'm thinking about who are we, I'm not just thinking about who are we as identities, who do we identify with? Who are we as an expression of life? What is this body anyway? What does it mean? I mean, how does anyone incarnate into a body, and why are there diseases? Are they there uh, just randomly, or is this something we can understand by diseases? And those questions led me to study a lot of the Bailey material. Alice Bailey, for those of you who are familiar with this, she has written extensively on the body of healing, and in particular, the understanding of energies. And of course, some of her theories are very, very different from the way we are used to thinking medicine in the West. But they've given me a lot of food for thought, which is the intention with that particular material. It's to inspire further reflection. And the process of creation, and part of being an individual and a collective human being, part of a collective, is a process of being able to become consciously creating with the energies that are known as life. From the most subtle matter to the most dense matter. And you have everything in yourself. The chart is an energy chart in many ways. And when I've been looking into the different varieties of medical astrology, I see that it's really difficult to get a consensus about which chakra is being ruled by which planet. You will find a lot of different theories. If you look into Vedic astrology, which is often very tightly connected to Ayurveda, you will find other ways of understanding it. And then there's a homeopathy who has another way of understanding the elements. And there are so many different systems in order to understand the body, and in order to understand what happens when the body loses its capacity to function uh, harmoniously, because that's what a disease is. The body cannot um, heal the imbalance. Now you can look at disease from an energetic point of view and see that there are imbalances in the energy system, and the Chinese version of medicine, the Tao, for instance, presents a certain insight into the different vital life forces that lies underneath. Astrology, I think, has a little bit of we need to work and research more. And Noel Till did some really good work on astrology and the onset of illnesses. And there are many good people in the field, but there's no consensus, the way that I can see it, as to which planet rules which glands, etc., and so forth. So that's my little disclaimer before I start this lecture, is that these are my reflections. These are my observations. In order to become a perfected healer, you have to understand illness on all the levels. You have to understand what karma is. You have to understand the different bodies, the emotional body, the physical body, the mental body. And you have to understand where a person is in terms of evolution. The more consciousness you have, the more refined the illnesses can be. Like, it can move from being very dense physical to becoming extremely mental, and or even, a real deep karmic experience. But the point is that we are always evolving, and I think that if we look at medical astrology from that point of view and accept that even traditional medicine can't understand everything, not yet, and understand that we are still on the path of understanding what it means to be human. And as long as we, for instance, do not know what the soul is, we can run into quite a bit of trouble when we try to understand diseases as well. It is a very difficult ethical path, because becoming conscious means becoming responsible. But due to us being both individuals and also being part of a collective karma, we can't be always individually responsible. For instance, we see this now with the onset of the pandemic. It is a collective experience. We are all in it, whether we get it or not. It's part of our collective initiation, our process. Each individual responds different, of course, to the virus and to the pandemic on a psychological level, but we all have a relationship to it. And we can see what type of relationship we have to collective illnesses or collective events like big wars and collective traumas. We can see how we would respond to that certain kind of event by looking at the birth chart. You would see some people are extremely sensitive, others are more, have more of that solar power and manage to kind of protect themselves a little bit from what's going on in the collective. So you can't really say that if somebody gets COVID, it's like, oh, what are you going to learn from this? Because we're all in it and we're all learning from it, whether we get it or not. And when we talk about spirituality and diseases and creation versus destruction, we cannot say to a human being, like, oh yeah, the cancer, you have to learn from it and blah, 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 It's inducing guilt, and it's not everything that's within our reach to kind of create. We are not invincible. And this is, understanding with humility how vulnerable we are, is very important when we, as astrologers and student of astrologers, approach the world of medical astrology. I've seen some really nasty things happen, not particularly within the world of astrology, but in terms of, healers saying to people, you're fully responsible for this. And the person being sick is really feeling overwhelmed and incapable, like a failure almost for having a disease. And that's not a healthy approach to healing. So yeah, that would be my little kind of like speech on ethics, if you want to, and that's very important when we meet clients, because everybody's, super vulnerable. And we cannot really know for sure. Medical astrology is really scary. Nobody wants to be sick. We don't want to be in pain. We are afraid. A lot of us are afraid that we might get sick, or we get some scary disease like cancer, which is like, it's cancer is surrounded by such a body of fear, understandably, because it's so associated with pain, and the way that we treat cancer is also associated with a lot of pain. It's painful. I'm sure if you've had to watch someone close to you get this disease, you know what it is. It's hard. And therefore, being humble when you also look at your own chart and not judge, this transit means that transit, is very important if we are to study medical astrology with any kind of success without scaring ourselves to death. We are, the astrology chart shows a disposition. It shows a potential. It doesn't mean it has to be like when we talk about genetics. I mean, it's weird. We can inherit genes, but it doesn't mean we get the disease. We can still have those genes that kind of like talk about a certain disease. And then there's the environment, and then there's our level of consciousness and the way we live and how we treat ourselves, etc., and so forth. So the healthiest way we can approach medical astrology is to ensure that people get aware of their weak spots and find methods to strengthen them, almost like a yoga of astrology. You lack fire, okay, work on the fire element. You lack water, okay, work on the water element. You lack earth, okay, work on your muscles, your body, your capacity for embodiment. We strengthen that which is weak, and thereby hopefully ensuring that that which could be triggered won't be triggered. And in order for us to do so, we have to go through numerous charts and a lot of data in order to become extremely familiar with the principles, the underlying theories. And I'm saying theories because the more I study this, the more I'm like, that maybe the moon is estrogen. Is the moon estrogen? Or maybe the moon is definitely oxytocin. Yeah, it is, and then you go into the glands and you just try to understand the hormonal glands, and you understand what type of effect they have, and you try to understand the immune system, and then you see it's really, really super complicated. A human being is a magical organism, and we are very complicated. It's a huge study because the perfect good healer knows the regular mechanical, anatomy, the organs, how they function, disease, theories on disease, they understand the body as a physical. They also understand psychology, the psychology of illness, whatever lies behind. They understand spirituality, the nature of the soul, and whatever lies above, so we get a chance when we train for this to get to know this complexity of being human in a way that's just mind-blowing, and it makes it really hard to generalize. So yeah, now that I said that, I think it's time I share my numerous PowerPoints. I'm like, I can never contain myself. I just like, oops, I think I probably made too many charts. Let's see how far we can get through the material before my time runs out. But I'm sure I can talk in double speed as I usually do. I'm such an airy person. So yeah, this is what I explained. Health is functional creation, disease is destruction and lack of harmony in the body, mind, and I would also say soul connection. There is something disconnected. And from an energy point of view, we often say that one chakra is dominant and it's taking energy from the other chakras, or like two chakras are dominant and it's not in alignment. It's not in alignment. Saturn, the planet of alignment, needs to come in and start creating alignment, proper alignment. This is the basis in yoga, proper alignment. And that could help the body start creating again instead of destroying its own organism. And that would be what we all would want, from the very molecular levels to the little proteins that kind of like make up our immune system, and all the blood cells and white cells and red cells and whatever. You have so much going on in the body that's like, it's a miracle. We are small walking miracles. It's just mind blowing. I love it, as you can probably see. So generally speaking, genes and karma, this is such a difficult part of the conversation of being human, because what is reincarnation anyway? We can sort of see reincarnation as a genetic inheritance. And then you have epigenetics, which is, even more interesting, but it's also showing us that there is something extremely important with our genes. There's software thing that's coming through from past lives, not necessarily how we would look at reincarnation from a more Tibetan view, which is, feels a little bit more, how could you just say, mythological or personal or psychological, but it's really the physical aspect of it and the genes. And sometimes when I have like really like earthy people coming for reading, and they ask, do you believe in reincarnation? I sometimes say to them, well, yeah, you have genetics, right? You mean, yeah. And that's very often South Node, Saturn. I would think a lot of the EA people would also say Pluto. Yeah. And then there's environment. And if you look at the solar system, so you come into this life with your genes and your karma, right? And then you come into an environment, which is like, it could be very polluted because you live in a very big city that doesn't take care of its citizens and drive around without taking care of their pollution, for instance, or a very violent place, or you could live in a very hectic place or a very slow place, or you can live very close to nature. I mean, and you can live in a healthy family and you can live in a dysfunctional family. You can go to a school that's very supportive of you, or you can come to a school that's really not healthy. So environment tells us a lot about how things are being triggered in us. The scenery can kind of trigger something in us, and that can cause trauma. If you look how the planets are made, and this is a metaphor I often use, is that they're kind of like, they took a beating. If you look at Mercury, it's like full of craters. They really took a beating. They were crashing into each other as they were created, and so were we. We were just boom, 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 and that's sometimes how I see us growing up and encountering the environment. Sometimes we really crash into something and there's a huge kind of crater, a trauma crater happening. So yeah, that's important to remember. And of course, as astrologers, you can see a little bit of the environment. You can see some of the trauma signatures. You can see some of the genetics and the karmic signatures. And you can also see some of the teachings that lies in a chart. This is very important. It's the same EA principles, the South Node, and now I added Saturn, Pluto, the Moon, for the past, and then the Sun, the Ascendant, and the North Node for the future. So they carry a lot of weight in understanding, both where we're coming from and what we're meeting and what that triggers in us as growth. And illness is part of that. the onset of illness and the point of diagnosis are not always the same. This is extremely important to point, actually, because sometimes we date for the onset of the illness, like the diagnosis, when that happened. But we can look back and we see that there's been some really stressful transits. And as healers, we want to get to the essence. What is the essence of this disease? We want to get to the essential energy, because that's what healing does. It goes to the point. It says, what's the essential feeling in this? What's the essential underlying experience that created the imbalance, that created the disharmony, that created this condition that in turn created a disease, an imbalance? I saw an episode of Lucifer. It's a show on Netflix yesterday, and Lucifer is this devil, the devil on earth, and he's trying to do stuff, I won't give any, I won't expose too much of what's happening, but he was in hell for this particular episode, and he was wanting to, one of his former enemies was in hell, and he wanted to help this guy. And when you get into the hellhole, as they call it, that you have the nightmares being revived. People live inside their nightmares. That's hell in their kind of like version of understanding what hell would be, which is very to the point, if you ask me. And it's like being stuck in a bardo, and the same things happen again and again and again. But this particular guy, they were like, first they came into a situation that's like, this can't be his ultimate nightmare. No, so they dig further, and then they come to a layer underneath, and then something else happens. He's even younger in that nightmare, and he's being abandoned. And then, and then it's like, but that doesn't sound like the original trauma. We have to go deeper, and they go even deeper, and they see this guy stuck in the hellhole as a young kid being abandoned by his mother. And then Lucifer understands everything. He says, oh my goodness, now I understand all the bad things you did, he said. Now I understand what created this. And that would be coming to the essence. That would be coming into the essence. I was really touched by that episode, really, because that's how we have to work. If we really want to help people, we have to get to the core of where the hurt is, and just see if we can make them release, get that release. Imagine the tension that leaves the body. Imagine the body then starting to get energy to clean up everything that's come out of order. And in this way, maybe, that's how healing sometimes can be translated into miracles. But for me, that's a fact of life, that's how it works. Maybe not everybody agrees with me, and back again to how responsible are you really? How conscious can you be? There's a limit to everything, even our knowledge, but I've seen great healings performed by excellent healers, and it's very efficient because it's to the core. We want to get to the core. It's not necessarily what we think is the core. It might be even a layer or two or three underneath there again, like this chain of happenings. And we search for that in our own lives as well. I want to get to the core of my own issues. I want to get deeper. I have to go deeper. That's why Pluto is such a root canal thing going on. You can't get away from it when it first starts its transits. And very often Pluto transits are very are renowned to have an incredible intensity, also through, for instance, the onset of longer illnesses that lasts for a duration and kind of evolves a human being greatly. It turns us into other human beings. Everything from loss to death, abandonment, everything you go through has the potential to either get you into a higher consciousness or not. It requires effort, though. Yeah, so that was the ethics thing. So when you see a stressful period coming up, be mindful. And when you see people come and they have have a diagnosis already, and you see that they've already been through some stressful aspects before, even years before, like the loss of a child or a divorce or something, it could be wise to take that into consideration when you want to get the overview. That last comment there is meant to be in a different section. So, whoops. In the world of element theory, which I think is so important to understand our constitution, we have to understand elements. And I'm still learning. This is the ABC of the astrology, and it never ceases to fascinate me. It never ends, my fascination with the elements. I'm still learning. This is really where I'm learning. And especially when you look at it from an energy point of view, it's when it starts to make sense for me if we want to get to like essential energies of the body. So fire, in the creating kind of hierarchy, we start with fire, then it goes to earth. Fire is the spark of life. It's the intuition. It's the origin of anything. It's like this, aha, and then it goes to the mind level. It goes to the mental level, which is a little denser. It's the mental level. And then the intuition gives room for thought, for planning, for concrete thoughts. Fire is abstract intuition. The mind is concrete thinking, right? And then it goes to, like, let's say you have an idea, you want to do something, right? I want to do this. So poof, you wake up one day and you have a vision of fire vision. And then you start thinking about it. And it's okay, it's plausible. I can do that. Yeah. Start examining your options. And then it goes to the water level. And then you start, but do I want to? Am I feeling secure enough to actually do this? A lot of creation stops there. If it doesn't stop there, if it doesn't stop in the mental level, it continues, and it's being birthed through the earth element. So it's not how we see the element in the birth chart, like we go from fire to earth to air to water. We go from fire to air to water to earth in this kind of way of seeing creation. And that's important if we want to understand health, because health is about creation. Yeah. And we want to see where is, the focus in this chart. What type of elemental being is this human in front of me? Is it a very airy person, a very watery person, a very earthy one, or a very fiery one? And they all have their dispositions when it comes to illnesses, a lot of them actually, So the spark of life, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, is the intuition, the origin. It's the life force, vitality, heart, and blood. And of course, the liver and, adrenals. And I will go through a more specific list over the planets afterwards. Homeopathy puts fire with the circulatory system. It makes sense. A lot of fiery people have a good kind of joie de vivre through their body if fire is being distributed. It's expressive, and it's a young kind of energy. It's very, look at the sun. It's just moving out from a center. So and when the sun rules the heart, and the heart is the thymus. Thymus is very important in the creation of our immune systems. So I consider, Mars and Sun to be, vital factors in understanding immunity. And when people are hypersensitivity and they all become too yin, they draw to them too much information and they don't know how to process it. They need more fire so that they can protect themselves without having to hide and run away and lock the door and say goodbye to the world. So fire is always a very healing agent. It's life itself. And fire burns off disease. It's, it's this high metabolism that kind of it purifies things. It burns off whatever is pollution, whatever is polluted, whether it's other people's energies or it's actual pollution. When you go through a period of purification, you sweat, you're warm, you kind of like, you feel your body is working. And whenever I feel my immune system is on its way down, it's like I can feel it in my heartbeat. I know exactly when I need to take care of myself and get my fire up. We need more fire in order to become immune. So this is a very important element I find myself working a lot with when it comes to clients. Okay, you need more expressive fire. Sometimes fire also is accidents. Sometimes I wonder what's the karma of accidents. When do we get into an accident? So yeah, but yeah, that's fire. I have an accident chart if we get there. So right, air, breath of life. It's the mental realm. It's our capacity to understand things through concrete understanding. Mercury, Uranus, Venus as Libra. Air cools down things. It's just like chill. People who are very airy normally have cold fingers and can be quite cold on their, feet. They can be a little like pale. A fire person is naturally glowing. Their skins are very glowing and soft, and they have this beautiful hair. And it's like, yeah, you can be very envious of that fiery quality. But it's important with air because it cools things down. If you get overheated, that's not too healthy for the body either. You get rashes, you get different kinds of, boils, and it's not good for any organ to be too hot. So air cools down things. It's also a yang, so it's also expressive. It's the respiratory system and the nervous system, especially as seen through the connection with Uranus. When you look at nervous illnesses and a lot of strange, weird neurological conditions, you will find a very prominent Uranus in the chart. It's also dissociative, as we know. You can have a lot of mental illnesses with Uranus, Mercury afflictions, and strained nervous system, hyper tense, hyperactive nervous system, thinking too much, being too much in the mental realm, not connecting well with the body, etc., and so forth. And these can be quite painful conditions, but it shows the mental diseases, mental imbalances, for instance, misunderstandings, like real deep misunderstandings as to what is what. So yeah, as we advance through the evolution, we will see a lot more. And we've seen that now we're starting kind of like identifying different mental diseases. We're starting to kind of like identify areas and dimension that we didn't do previously. We were so focused on the material, we failed to kind of see the psychological aspects of everything. I wanted to say something else with fire. If you suppress fire, that can be super bad. Don't suppress fire, not your own fire, not other people's fire. A person who is severely suppressed in the fire department can be depressed. There's no spark of life, right? And angry. Depressed people are normally quite angry. So just getting the fire to burn again is part of, the dopamine healing, and dopamine is very Mars, right? Getting Mars to work again. Right. So water of life, we come to water of life. And, being EA astrologers, that Moon, Pluto, and, the water triad is extremely important because it's where we evolve as human beings. It's through our feelings we evolve. I do not agree entirely with that because I think it excludes other evolutions, but definitely a huge initiation in being alive is how to regulate and heal our own feelings. The way we feel about things is also incredibly important for how much we think we can do and how much we can connect with life, right? So as you can see in this very creational part, when we're coming into water, we're actually coming into life. It emotes, it's here. I'm here, I'm emoting, I'm feeling something. I'm like, whoop, I'm starting to connect with this organism. When I'm just in my mind, I'm not connecting. When I'm in my fire, I'm like, fire can be extremely living in a different fantasy world, like in the world of visions, for instance, or in the world of fairy tales and adventures, and pretending to be like the, the Knight of Life or something like that. It's really a mythological kind of archetypal dimension. But water is really hands-on here and now, and it's the bodily fluids, the glands. I'd say glands as a different glands, different functions. So we have to specify, but it's everything that flows in the body. It's the kidneys, and it's our general sensitivity. Yin is magnetic. Yang is expressive. It's plus and minus. So when we get into the yin qualities, we are really being connected to our bodies. We are being born. In water, we are living our first 9 months in the water, in the womb, in Neptune, in the womb of our mothers. We were brought into life. So we're being carried into life by water. Very, very important element, and extremely extremely sensitive towards pollution. A water human being can feel and sense everything. It's like, whoo, what was that? It's very connected with the collective vibes and people around them, and a lot of course, psychological issues will happen here because of this sensitivity. And when there's a trauma happening at the same time, that experience is filtered through a distortion, and then you can get psychosis, for instance, when it's just so encapsulated. And that's a word I want to bring in, encapsulation. Pain, trauma is being encapsulated, and it's being held in you can almost call it a little bardo. It's being held, it's encapsulated, and it's really, it's taking over the system. Yeah, I'm sure you all have some blocks here and some lack of distribution there, and one arm is working well and the other isn't, and maybe there's some encapsulated disappointment sitting over your heart, for instance. And as a healer, you would go in, if you were a psychologist or energy healer or an astrology or even a medical doctor, you would say, maybe you are carrying a little bit of sadness in you. You should work on that, just get it to flow again. So water can freeze. We need to make it flow again, right? As from a healing perspective. Right, the last one, matter of life. It's sensation, anything you can touch and feel, and muscles, connective tissues, bones, digestion, skin, smell, sensations. It's Venus as Taurus, and Mercury as Virgo, Saturn, as Capricorn as usual, and it's materialization. That's when it's really coming into this body that I'm currently enjoying very much. I'm like, yeah, I like my body. I can smell, I can taste, I can feel, I'm in my body. So it's a lot about embodiment, and that's incarnation. When we dare to embody, we dare to incarnate fully with all of us. Every aspect of us, all the multiple strange subpersonas, the trauma, the talents, the greatness, the vulnerabilities, the everythings, the whole spectrum. It's a brave thing to do in a world of judgment. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff on a collective mental level that keeps us ill because we do not open up enough, because we dare not. So that's going to end up in your body eventually. And that's how also illness, as when life energy is being blocked, sometimes manifests in the body. Taurus is a psychosomatic sign, and often carries emotions in the body. And even medical sciences for a long time now have started to appreciate that there's a connection between the emotion and the general health of the body, which is like, for me, it's like Yeah, sure. I, of course, of course. So this makes it even more complex because we are not here to judge a disease. We are here to understand it. And it's not just about understanding the why, what type of organ and what's the function of that organ, etc., and so forth. As holistic therapists, we are interested in knowing the whys. What is that really about? What is the psychosomatic connection to this one? So yeah, right. Let's see my time. Okay, I gotta talk quicker. All right, sun, vitality, life force, heart, the thymus. We were there. Moon, emotional issues. Breast, stomachs, oxytocin. And oxytocin is this connection hormone. Very important. If you touch people or hug them for a long time, they will feel connected to you. And if they feel connected to you, they feel safe. And it's associated with the posterior pituitary, which is it's organizing, it's not producing any hormones the way that I've come to understand it, but it's balancing a lot of the water processes in the body. And also, associated with the moon because of, the watery quality of the moon. Mercury, hands, lungs, cognitive mind, thyroid, pancreas. As for Virgo, Virgo has a lot to do with, they can be hypersensitive when it comes to, being able to enzymatically help the food to become digested. Digestion is also part of a moon thing, because it has to do with nourishment, and also put Ceres there actually, because that's also about sustenance and nourishment. So when you see trouble with Virgo, moon, Ceres, you might have an eating disorder, or you could have like trouble with getting enough nourishment from the food. Just maybe the system isn't capable of digesting and releasing that which is toxic, and you can have kind of like an inner type of pollution going on. Ideally, the digestive system will get food, keep what's nourishing, and get rid of the rest, right? Getting rid of the rest is the Pluto thing. Oh, you're able to get rid of that which is blocking your life force. Great. That. So Mercury with his hands, you get asthma, and you get all kinds of lungs, you get asthma, you get all kinds of lung diseases. It's also the cognitive mind. Stressed out people, it can really affect the thyroid, and thyroid really affects the metabolism. So you get these skinny mercurial types who think a lot, right? You get these like, it can get angst. It can give you anxiety. Venus, Taurus through the neck, psychosomatic, as I said, as well. Taurian diseases tend to be psychosomatic, but it's also, a fertility thing, how fertile is your body, how, sometimes with Taurus, we have a lot of isolation issues. They shut down to prevent invasion from the surrounding, because the evolutionary need in Taurus is to find your own center of gravity, so isolation is a good way to get there, but it's not always healthy. So you can have people who are incapable of expressing feelings, for instance, or can't get out of themselves in a way. There can be feeling of being trapped inside themselves. With Libra, there's this balance thing going on, always balance, 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 balance. Sometimes you could also think that, if we think of a mental disease, maybe we could also sometimes get associations to bipolarity, for instance, or to extreme behavior like borderline. And, where you've been extremely nice for a long time and then you can't do that anymore. So it's also the sexual hormones according to certain systems. This is again something I need to study personally more, right? Estrogen and testosterone. We know that Mars most likely is connected to the adrenals, and we know that the adrenals are sitting on top of the kidneys. So we have a duality of Mars Venus going on with the kidney adrenals. And the kidneys, they rule, let's see if I can remember this right, the sympathetic nerve. Well, oh gosh, I forgot the words now. We work so much with it. One part of the nervous system is turning everything off, like chill down. Parasympathetic nervous system, I think that would be. And it makes the body replenish itself. It builds up the body again. I would associate that with Venus. We know Venus is our capacity to be a little lazy and relax. And that's a good thing. We can't always be young. We have to be yin too. And it balances us. And if you think of the kidneys as a real balancing kind of act, the Chinese people, they put life force itself, like the chi, it's kind of like the temple of chi is what they called. I think they call it that in Chinese medicine, but this is the storehouse of the chi. When the chi is low, the kidney gets weaker and the hair gets gray and stuff like that. And they say we lose a lot of the kidney chi through either ejaculation or menstrual cycles, and for women in particular through births. So that's when you're like the essence of the chi essence, if you think of it as your battery and it's going to last your entire life, the Chinese people think that ejaculating too much or bleeding heavily or some form of imbalance in the sexuality and in the organs that are reproductive greatly disturbs the chi in the kidneys and our capacity to be balanced. So yeah, it's a very interesting kind of loophole to go into that one. Mars, adrenals, accidents, fever, cortisol, fight and flight response, dopamine. Whenever I see a strong Mars, it's the guardian. It's the guardian of, it's like, what are you doing here? What do you want with me? It's our reactive immune response in a way. So Mars has a lot to do with the immune system for sure, being the blood and all, Mars, the little soldier, think of the immune system as the soldiers. And it's like, well, we have a danger ahead, it's like the alert system of the body. And then, okay, everybody to work, and the blood starts going to a particular place where they see that here's an inflammation and here's some sort of weird thing happening. Okay. And then they start working to heal. So it's very interesting what goes on in the adrenals. Adrenal fatigue, burnout, you get, a lot of Mars going on there as well. Every fire has a tendency to kind of like exaggerate a little bit. So I guess ruling everything would be a good Saturn, and we're going to see that now. Jupiter, liver, growth of cells, obesity, cancer. Due to this growth, when you see a real aggressive type of cancer, normally I tend to find a lot of Jupiter there because it's like, oh, hey, chill down, don't grow so fast. The expansiveness of Jupiter, can make things grow quickly. We don't want that with Cancer. We want Saturn. We want restriction. We want something to restrict that growth. Now, so Saturn is normally bones, teeth, and skin. For instance, rheumatoid diseases, you have inflammation through Mars, and then you have Saturn through the connective tissues, Saturn. So there you go, Mars Saturn thing. Okay. If I see a client with that, I would either say, be careful with your back and don't strain yourself and don't run too quickly and do too much. And take care of your, anger issues, your inflammations. Mars. And with Jupiter, it's always a matter of do not exaggerate. The mental diseases we sometimes find with Jupiter is related to exaggerations. Maurice, my teacher and colleague, he said that Jupiter Neptune, for instance, would be a bipolar thing. Now that would be, kind of like we could do a whole 3-4 hour class on mental diseases and astrological correlations, and I won't go too deep into that, but we put one and one together. These are my theories and my observations about which planet rules what, right? There's Jupiter Saturn's anterior pituitary gland. It's the ruling gland. It produces hormones that regulate the entire endocrine system, and it regulates growth, right? So if you have a hyper-growing thing, like Saturn just regulates, like, okay, you see children getting into a certain age, like you have the Jupiter return at 12 and they start growing immensely, and then Saturn is like, the bones can't, they're growing a little bit slower. So you have all these growth pains. And that's a very Jupiter Saturn period from 12 to 14. And a lot of kids go through a lot of changes in their bodies at that time. So yeah, chat. Let's go. Oh yeah, ciao, Carolyn. All right, Oitam. Uranus, nervous system, electricity, perhaps ruling the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is a gland that's even more interior in the brain, and it's kind of like informing the pituitary gland. It's informing, it has some sort of information. Neptune, the pineal gland, dream stage, strange and sudden diseases, autoimmune diseases. And I see to my great dismay that I forgot to put up Pluto here, but I can do that, Let's just do Neptune a little bit, Uranus a little bit more. But the nervous system, when we have any kind of nervous imbalance in the nervous system, Uranus will be present. If you have any kind of strange and weird disease and it's autoimmune and nobody heard about it, it's probably Neptune, and there are, of course, numerous different mental imbalances that can be with these two in a chart. If you see Uranus, Neptune coming together, you will have a lot of really advanced, intuitive type of energy running through a human being, and you can get some very interesting and often difficult states. Neptune and megalomania, for instance, or being lost. You have also escapism. Uranus, as I mentioned earlier, is a disassociation, and also eccentricity, like real impulsive, eccentric behavior. Neptune can also be extremely infantile, naive. So, and that sort of can cause a lot of psychological imbalance as well. Pluto. Yeah, I don't know what type of disease will like. Well, Pluto is transformer. It's such an underlying, overarching kind of energy when it comes to EA, and let's just say that it's Pluto will get you to the bottom of things. And with Pluto, there are, it could be reproductive problems. You can have sexual transmitted diseases. And there can also be obsessions and traumas and psychosis, which I find very often, actually. The whole area of Scorpio can be extremely obsessed and really like focused in on one thing, and it might not be in accordance with reality, and all kinds of compulsions. It's a very psychological planet, Pluto, and manipulation, abuse. We get all the shit with Pluto, don't we? It's like the shadow coming up, right? It's also our strength, though. So remember that, power, Right. We're going to look, if I have time. No, I don't think so. But addictions, right, is a whole chapter in medical astrology that where we run into Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto quite a lot, to be quite honest, depending on what type of addiction. Right. So the immune system is made up of special organs, cells, and chemicals that fight infections, microbes. The main part of the immune system are white blood cells, antibodies, the complement system. These are the proteins, and this is where that vaccine is working through. Lymphatic system, the spleen, the thymus, the bone marrow. These are the parts of your immune system that actively fight infection. That's a lot. How could you put just one planet on that? But the strength of your immune system is very often seen through Sun, Moon, and Mars. Mars is that little fire that says, what do you want, you stupid microbe? You can't get in here because I'm strong. I got my armor on. Challenges to the immune system, I could probably put Uranus there as well, but Neptune in particular is a biggie when it comes to autoimmune diseases. Neptune, Mars, Sun, Neptune, Moon, Neptune. Neptune tends to take us into an area where we do not have control over our lives. And a lot of the bigger diseases is exactly that experience. We just have to surrender to it. I know some astrologers who, actually calls Neptune the immune system. I've been thinking a lot about that because I'm trying to understand the immune system. I'm like, what is it anyway? And yeah, I can see that because Neptune is the collective field in a way. It's the if you did use a Jungian term, we would say the collective astral field would be probably the appropriate way of naming it. But it's I call it almost like psychological immunity or spiritual immunity. Like Neptune is that little bubble that surrounds us that is kind of like where do I begin? Some Neptunians don't know where they end and where other people begin. It's without boundaries. Mars is boundaries. So Neptune can really weaken the immune system. And it's not supposed to be, we're not supposed to be defensive all the time. We're supposed to be open. And if you want to have a spiritual experience, it's because you are opening up to it. You become open when you are spiritual. It's like you can feel everything. You can feel the higher vibrations of existence. And then you have an experience that we translate into spiritual. It's like, I'm just filled with beautiful love and just blissful feeling. It's very Neptunian. It's like I'm back in the womb of life and everything is safe. And, so we have to be open. So therefore, I think Neptune is extremely, Neptune, Mars in particular, they're kind of like a dichotomy in a way, because Mars is like, oh, no, here's my boundary. And Neptune is like, I don't have boundaries, Saturn too, see Saturn too fighting, like very defined rules, it's a big, nope, we don't do that here. Neptune is like, I'm open to everything. And you can see the dichotomy of Neptune and Mars is that, if you get autoimmune diseases, like my father has one, and he has Mars in Pisces, he has a condition called MS. And he says, I actually have too good of it, and my immune system is too efficient. It's like, it's not entirely true, but MS is a condition where the little layer around the nerve threads are being infected, and it makes the body act in weird ways, because the nervous system is so important for our capacity to function in the world, even just movement and muscles and etc. and so forth, and seeing and breathing, and everything is like programmed through the nervous system. So when something happens in that little layer, which is a very fluid thing, that little, it's like a cord that has a little layer of protection around it. When that's not working, you just don't get that same kind of signaling happening. And it's not working because it's infected. So the body is not just, it kind of like fights itself in a way. And that would be, just stands there and just, like Mars is just not getting anywhere. And sometimes I see this with, people with allergies or asthma or something like that. Like, I've been wondering, I don't see it, like I'm wondering, is there some sort of danger that is subconsciously perceived through Mars, and I need to be like on cautious, like on, because for instance, asthma, the breathing, breathing the air, or being in a certain environment where you can start feeling all the little chemicals in somebody's shampoo is starting to get under your skin, and you're like, like there's a feeling of being attacked by something. And that's a very Martian thing. There's something happening with our immune system when it starts fighting itself that I think is very much related to Mars, Neptune, and cracking that code might be helpful for someone. Yeah, so it's like I'm too open, so I need to be very defensive, for instance. It's like the body is saying that. An immune system, boy, aren't we all learning about that these days? I mean, when that is said, stay safe, people. Don't let it get to you. Don't let it get to you. It's pollution. Right. So, well, let's see. My time is, I have 10 more minutes. So yeah, here is from the book of homeopathy and the 4 elements. Processing fire, fever, heart, brain, central nervous system, eyesight. We often put eyes. And then you have hemorrhage, arteries, and we know hemorrhaging and strokes, inflammations on the other side. It's very airy, but as you see, inflammation is moving towards Earth. And that's, as I said, when you have Saturn, Mars, Earth, Mars, you get inflammation of the bones, the skin, the connective tissues, your teeth, whatever, it's a fire earth thing. If you have hemorrhaging, it's a fire water thing, right? And then you have processing water, feelings. Well, here, let me use my pen. Edema, kidneys, taste. Water is taste. I can taste it. I would also say, well, here we are, smell. Water is memory, right? So memory is smell, but they connect air and water for smell in this one. Cold and swollen, veins, capsule of joints, a more passive child. When you get water, air, you can get a very nervous disposition. You could get somebody who's extremely sensitive and can be also, if it's really imbalanced, neurotic. So yeah, it can be a little neurotic. If you have air, earth, they put hearing on air in this homeopathic system, and I really had nothing to object there. It's the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine system, and the lungs. And they call also, it's the, dying, it's letting go. Processing air, letting go, getting perspectives, right? Processing fire, passion. This is a very interesting overview. I mean, I really could sit with this and meditate a long time. I really love it that they have like the midway between 2 elements here. What they didn't put was the oppositions of the elements. That would have been interesting, but you could probably make that correlation yourself. The earth air is a wise old person, is the paralysis, the pancreas, the bladder. Paralysis, yeah. All right, so that's earth and air. Yeah, so that's one of the other systems that can go in and help us understanding the elements when we want to understand health in astrology. So yeah, I thought for the last, what Helen Keller is doing to us all, and I thought, okay, let's just show, because we have some data on Helen Keller. She was born in 1880. She was famous before, she knows, from this chart, we can kind of assess that she already knew what it means to get a lot of attention, because she was born with the sun in Cancer on the South Node, and it's also flanked by Venus. And it shows that she's a very homebody. There's part of her that just wants to retreat into the Cancerian shell. And her life was a very Cancerian shell type of experience. She was deaf, mute, and blind, thanks to a brain fever that she got at 19 months old. And still, with that passionate, fiery Mars, I mean, she lived to be 88. Dude, that's so cool. I mean, I won't give up. I will never surrender. That's the sun on the south node, right? And she was really someone you could look up to. I mean, come on. It's really impressive, to be quite honest. And maybe part of her karma was to learn to use that power of, the will force. Maybe her condition, her disease, accentuated the fact that Saturn was in fire sign Aries. You have to want to be here. You have to want to be here. The will of life. Do you want to be here? That's what Saturn in Aries says. Do you want to be here? A lot of us going through diseases, we get that choice. It's like, so what do you want? Do you want to be here? Do you want to fight? Do you want to fight? Do you want to get up every day and fight? Do you want to, she took her condition and she's like, I'm going to learn how to come do it, I have a lot to say. I have Mercury in Taurus, but I don't have words. I don't have hearing. I don't have eyes. I have to use what? I have to use my hands. Look at that Chiron Neptune in Taurus in the 6th house. It's just so hard to believe. She was entrapped inside her body, like she was there, but she couldn't really get what the world around her was about. She never had, and her senses were dimmed. And yeah, the frog in the well syndrome, isn't that a thing with Jeffrey? I think it's a good description of Taurus, frog in the well syndrome. And of course, she might have had a little bit of narrow, she was very focused, at least, maybe this was just like a thing to learn to focus. And thankfully, her imagination with that moon in Pisces, and often when you see Neptune moon in a chart of disease, you also see somebody who has, this is like a brain fever, conditions that kind of karmically tells us that we have to learn how to take better care of our bodies. And maybe that was part of her evolution in that lifetime. She was forced into her senses in a way. She was forced into her body in a way, because it was through her sense of touch that she could actually feel the world. She couldn't see it, she couldn't hear it, she couldn't communicate with it, but she could touch it. And there's 3 planets, including Chiron in Taurus, and 2 of them are in the 6th house. Neptune in the 6th house, anything 6th house, it sort of shows us that illness very often corrects our capacity, our habits of routine. We have to become extremely precise with routine. Neptune is a place where we often tend to be a little naive or neglectful. So maybe she had a karma of neglect when it came to her physical or bodily needs or emotional needs. And her condition in that lifetime helped her express herself very, she had to receive help, she had to be in a situation where she was dependent on others. And maybe that was a good thing. Her sun is in the 8th house, learning to trust again. She really had to learn to trust, right? I mean, trusting, you're not leading me out, I trust you, the person who's leading me, to not put me on the side of the road and just leave me, right? So she really had to learn to trust me. With this chart, 8th house and 4th house moon, you see a great potential for evolution of the emotional body in this lifetime. And I'm sure she did. She lived successfully until the age of 88. This was Helen Keller, approximately 19 months after her birth. And yeah, that's the problem with back in the days. They didn't kind of like, oh, that's the day she got her brain fever. But I just put up a date that I thought was approximately what I think, Jupiter Again, Jupiter, you funny little thing, because you're normally never what you pretend to be. You're something else. It's not always as benevolent as we would think it is. Sometimes it's taking away something from us. We have to let go of something. There is something coming in, and it's on her Venus. First observation. We cannot say anything about the moon, so we're just going to forget that, because I have no idea where that is. We know that Jupiter is going to stay within, that period of time, that year, or around her 8th house. We also know that Chiron will be stuck on that Pluto for quite a while. We know when Chiron is in Taurus, it's moving quite slowly, actually. It's very close to the Earth when it's in Taurus. So it's moving it's far away from the Earth when it's in Taurus, excuse me. And it's moving very slowly. So it's going to stay there, and it's on her Pluto. And by then, the nodal axis has come over to her Chiron Neptune. And Saturn has also moved into that area. She's like in Saturn in the 6th house. And there was something that really caught my attention. That was the Mars thing, because it's a fever. It's a brain fever. So there's a lot of Pluto, Jupiter, Neptune things going on for this period. All the fast moving planets we can't say anything about because we don't have a precise date. But that's how we work with medical astrology. We're working with cycles, the incoming cycles, the outgoing cycles. And we can see with the Mars on the North Node here in her 12th house that, she's being hijacked by some really intense, feverish conditions. Mars is fever. Something's happening, Some people put the moon for the brain. Uranus is in opposition to her moon. Other people, the moon is the brain is a very complicated jello thing. Our head's full of electricity, and it's very watery in its nature, and that's why a lot of astrologers that I know of normally associate the brain with the moon. Again, the brain is very complicated, so there will be many subcategories underneath that, but the organ itself might be very lunar. Yeah, absolutely. She dies. Death charts is very often part of a disease, right? When we die, we normally get, she fell asleep. She actually died in her sleep, but she had several strokes in the early 60s, and strokes, Mercury in Leo, Mars in Leo, could be strokes. Jupiter in Aries, trying that Mars. She dies with, isn't this beautiful? She gets this stupid disease when Jupiter is on her South Node by transit. And she dies when the transiting North Node is on her Jupiter. There is something Jupiterian about that, her life, her living, her disease, her, I think she really karmically succeeded with integrating that which was the whole essential learning of her life. I think she really found peace with it. And she, when people find peace with things, they tend to fall asleep very peacefully. And Neptune is on that ascendant. So she fell asleep super peacefully. That would be a great way to die. Very often when I see Neptune by death transits, it's very often that peaceful thing, that kind of like, yeah, I'm done. I'll surrender. I'll let go. You don't go kicking and screaming out of life. You just, I'm done. So this is also part of medical astrology, is that death charts are as individual as birth charts. We cannot say that that's it and that's that. She has a Saturn return though, and that's very often the signature that, okay, chapter's off, next chapter, ready for next chapter. So yeah, that's all the words you're going to get from me today. And it was probably extremely wordy. And I have material for a lot of other stuff. And my intention and my plan is to put up a workshop that is way more precise and specific than this particular little 1 hour and 15 minutes lecture. So thank you for hearing me out. And yes, Sue, I think I was done chatting now.
Thank you so much, Soul. That was so informative and just awesome. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And hopefully we'll get the next chapter of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm this is workshop material because it's so much material.
Yeah.
It's like a school. It should
Yeah,
be a school.
absolutely. Yeah, it's great. What to do, how to mitigate everything is.
Yeah, how to work with it. I mean, I'm still an apprentice, you know, I haven't taken my Jedi steps yet, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, you're doing great. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah.
Bye.
All right. Ciao, ciao.